Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's evening. We're so excited to be cooking alongside all of you. My name is Britt. I'm the founder of Home Ec, and I'm so excited to be cooking alongside Chef Brian today. I'll be his sous chef throughout class. I'll be in the chat inputting ingredient quantities so you have a quick reference of what you're doing in your own kitchen. Feel free to cook with your video on. Chef loves to see you cooking alongside in your home kitchen. If you have any questions or need any support, feel free to drop it in the chat where I'll be, or turn your mute off and come aloud and ask Chef Brian directly. I think that's all from me, so I'll pass it off to Chef Brian. Happy cooking.
Thank you, Brett. Welcome, everybody. My name is Brian. I'm executive chef here at Cakebread Cellars. Very happy to partner with Home Ec on this. I don't know, just a show of hands. You can either use just raise your hands. Anybody been to the winery before? No? Well, hopefully we can change that. We would love to see you visit the winery sometime. We have a variety of different experiences that we do at the winery. One of them that I'm particularly proud of and fond of doing are cooking classes. So this is a way for us to reach a little bit of a wider audience with the help of Home Ec, and give you a little taste of maybe what a cooking class might be like here at the winery. I am not standing in the kitchen right now. I don't know if anybody has a tank behind you in your kitchen that's this size. This is our fermentation, one of our fermentation rooms. And if you were here in August, these would be filled probably with Sauvignon Blanc fermenting. So this is a working winery, and we actually entertain in the winery. We're set up a station here. This allows us to have a little bit of privacy and do this, but right behind me, we're actually in the winery. So my kitchen might look a little bit different than yours this evening. I'm gonna make a recipe to highlight either one of these two wines I have in front of me. I hope, if you're cooking with me, that you've taken the time to pour yourself a glass of wine. So if you don't have a glass, and actually I see Sarah's got a bottle of Cakebread in front of her, so that's great. Let's cheers to everybody. So I hope you've enjoyed the holidays so far. Quality time with friends and family. And thank you for spending time with us. So I've got a glass of Pinot Noir to enjoy, which I think will go wonderfully with this dish. If you're more of a white wine drinker, the Chardonnay Reserve would also be wonderful. So cheers. I cook with wine and I drink it while I'm cooking. So what we're gonna do is a recipe that I think lends itself well to this format, for me to show you a couple things, hopefully learn a couple things, give you a recipe that you'll enjoy with your family, and fits within this time frame. So one of my favorite dishes is my wife's roast chicken. When we first started dating, it was one of the first recipes she made for me, and it was one of the things she would do on a Sunday, which tended to be my day off, and it's one of the things I would look forward to, and it's made by somebody that means the world to me. So I sort of used her recipe as a jumping off point for us to make something today. So what we're going to do is, and I see a lot of you are cooking with me, so you should have your groceries and you should have them all out. If you haven't done so, please preheat your oven. So go ahead and turn that up to 400, and we'll start cooking. Okay, so I've got, can you run to the kitchen and get me chicken that's on a sheet pan? This is not the kitchen that we're in, and I just realized the main ingredient is in my refrigerator. So everybody grab your chicken thighs, and if you haven't done so, if there's any skin on the outside of them, we want to cut that off. So basically you want just enough of the fat, the skin on it, to cover the meat. And I think in the last class I did, somebody asked me, can you do this with skinless, boneless? And yes, you can. But I think it's better, even if you don't eat the skin, and I totally get that. It helps keep the meat moist and from drying out. And so I always buy the chicken with the skin on it. And then I also like it with the bone in. You could do it boneless, but just as a roasted chicken is more flavorful than a boneless chicken breast. You know, a boneless chicken breast dries out really easily. It's not as flavorful if you roast whole chicken on the bone. Thank you. So Mark ran all the way, took like 300 yards to get half a mile, and he sprinted. So I've got whole chicken. What I'd like you to do, if you haven't done so already, is season it pretty liberally. I use kosher salt. That's just what we tend to use in most commercial kitchens. And then again, pretty liberally with the pepper. And we're going to do that on both sides. I hope that you also have a nice fan over your hood, because one of the things we want to do, and I wanted to sort of emphasize with you, is we're going to sear these off. And you need a really hot pan. So whether you're doing a steak, or searing a piece of salmon, chicken like we're doing right now, you want a nice hot skillet so that you'll get nice caramelization. Things will brown, and that in turn will make the chicken more flavorful. But when we get further down the road, we're going to make a pan sauce, and this was an opportunity for me to sort of emphasize how to do that. And so that caramelization, that browning that we're going to get on the chicken, but also in the bottom of the pan, you want a really hot pan. So you're going to turn that on, let it get nice and hot before anything else goes in there. And I also could talk a little bit about pans. So I've got this, I think it's an all-clad pan, nice wide surface, so I'm not going to crowd the chicken too much. And it's thick. So all-clad is usually aluminum with a stainless steel lining, and aluminum connects heat really well. You want a pan that's got some heft to it, so it distributes the heat really well. Thinner pans, things tend to burn in them. And because we're going to add some wine and some lemon to this, stainless steel would be a better choice than using, say, cast iron or a steel pan. Okay, so should be getting hot. Hopefully your pan's getting hot. Once I can feel heat coming off of it, then I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil to the pan. So you probably can't see it, but it's actually starting to smoke a little bit. It should sizzle. And Brett, I'm going to rely on you if any questions do come up. I may not see them, so please feel free, anyone. This is an opportunity for you to ask any questions you may have. And then the other thing that I see a lot of people do is we get impatient. You know, I get impatient too, as much as anybody else. But when you're trying to sear something, you don't want to turn it too soon or too often. We want to give the chicken skin, and if I didn't say so, skin side down first. You want to give that an opportunity to stick to the pan, and then as it starts to brown, it'll start to release. So if you try turning it too soon, the skin will rip. You won't get the color on it that we're sort of aiming for. So, and
Chef, we do have one question. Why do you prefer a stainless steel over a cast iron for this?
So cast iron, which I love, if you come to my house and I make you fried chicken, I'm probably going to do it in a cast iron pan because it does hold heat really, really well. They're somewhat inexpensive. But in this instance, we're going to make a pan sauce, and we're going to deglaze the bottom of the pan with wine or acid and a little bit of lemon. So cast iron, acidic ingredients aren't the best to use in cast iron. They're nice and heavy. I love them for that. But you don't want to add tomato sauce to them, wine to them. It can sort of leach into the food, and it can discolor it a little bit too. Okay, so should have some color on it. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to turn that over. Surprising, I'm cooking on a butane burner, which you are not, but it's amazing how quickly these get hot. All right, everybody can see that. People have their back to me, so I assume they're cooking. That's good. I got some waves. Somebody from Pinehurst.
Tonight we have people from coast to coast, California, North Carolina, New York, all over the place.
Well,
We got in the middle too. We've got some Illinois.
great. Well, thanks. I hope everybody enjoys this, especially those of you on the East Coast. You're holding off on dinner time, so I hope it's worth it. So, all right. So starting to get some color here, and then while I'm waiting on that, I should be pulling out my vegetables. So when my wife does a roast chicken, she'll put it in a really hot oven and she'll put potatoes and carrots and sometimes sweet potatoes all the way around it. So I want to do a little bit of the same thing. We have carrots, which we're going to peel. And then I have a bulb of fennel. And I know not everybody, this is not as popular a vegetable in the grocery store. So if you've never worked with it, this is an opportunity to maybe learn a little bit more about it. Fennel has a sort of a licorice flavor to it. You can shave it into salads raw, and then it sort of preserves a little bit of that licorice-like flavor to it. And it's also crunchy, or you can cook with it like we're gonna do today, which then it's not quite as strong. And I know not everybody really likes that licorice flavor. When you cook it, a lot of that dissipates. So it's browned on both sides, and I'm gonna turn this off, and then we're gonna get our vegetables prepped. Okay, so let's get that done. Well, if you buy fennel, and you're not familiar with how to use it, the part you want is just the bottom. All of this is pretty fibrous, and it's probably going to get discarded. Or if you like to make stock or a soup or something like that, you might be able to utilize it that way. Okay, so I'm going to cut that off and set it to the side. And then on the bottom side, you can see there's the root end. That sort of holds all your layers together. So if you cut it lengthwise, you'll see that, right? And like an onion, you have that core, and that holds all the layers together. In this instance, I don't want to keep it together. If I wanted to grill it or roast them whole, I might cut through that core to sort of hold the layers together. But what I'd like you to do today is make a V cut on either side where we can remove that, okay? And then I want them like 2-inch pieces. So I want them sort of cook evenly with the carrots. So I cut them in half again, and then I cut them into wedges. So I want them to cook sort of the same rate, get some caramelization on them while our chicken thighs are cooking. Okay, carrots, we're gonna peel them. And I have rainbow carrots. I don't know if everybody has, red or orange carrots, perfectly fine. I just thought it was more interesting to have a variety of colors. Most importantly, I think, is that the carrots taste like carrots. So I tend to buy carrots that have the tops on them if I have the option. And I think that, they'll be nice and fresh and taste more of the vegetable that they are, as opposed to ones that might be sitting in cold storage for a long period of time and they're dried out and they're not as flavorful. So these still had their tops on them. They should be nice and sweet. And as I said, we've got the rainbow carrots that I think just visually, they just look a little more interesting.
Chef, if you were planning to make this meal again, but the grocery store was out of fennel, what would you get instead?
So, this time of year is sort of the best time for root vegetables. So the carrots are good. I think any variety of different root vegetables will be nice. It could be parsnips, it could be celery root. My wife is, I'm making not mashed potatoes, but crushed potatoes, but you could roast potatoes with it. Little new potatoes would be nice. Some leeks, just, but I don't know. I think root vegetables are probably best this time of year. Okay. So good question. Always good, get to the grocery store and something, either they don't have it, or it doesn't look that nice. So having a backup plan is always a good idea when you go to the store. Now I'm going to do a cut, and if you've already cut them, don't worry about it, but I'm going to show you a cut. This is what's called an oblique cut or a rolling cut, and I want them similar size to our fennel, but I want as much surface area as I can. So an oblique cut is cut on a diagonal, and then you roll it, hence the rolling cut. So you wind up with, 3 sides like that. And if they're small, like these are, I guess, medium-sized carrots, you can just cut them this way. If they were bigger, I might cut them in half first before I did this. But it just creates a little bit more surface area. And if you want to roast them, a lot of the, the flavor you get out of them is, the caramelization and the browning that takes place. So creating more surface area is beneficial. So I got my carrots, I have my fennel, and also some garlic. So with the garlic, I'm not going to peel them. So right now, all I want to do is have them in separate cloves. And, if you really like garlic, bigger ones are good. And you could just, this is actually my favorite part of my wife's roast chicken, is she always throws garlic cloves in. And then if we have a loaf of bread, then you just squeeze the pulp out onto a piece of bread. That's like the best. We're gonna actually squeeze it out into our pan sauce that we make. Okay, so I've got garlic cloves. Don't peel them. In this instance, we don't want them peeled. Okay. I turn the burner back on. So once this gets nice and hot, we're gonna put our veggies in.
Chef, what temperature is the burner?
High. So it should sizzle when it goes back in. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but you want it to sizzle. We're not trying to sweat the vegetables. We want to get color on it. And I always put a little pinch of salt in. You'll find chefs, we tend to season, not at one time, but we'll season throughout a recipe. So we might do it initially in the beginning, but we also might finish with a little bit of salt towards the end as well to balance out and make sure our seasoning's where we want it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of salt while we start caramelizing our vegetables.
Chef, why are we not unpeeling the garlic?
So it'll burn. So cooking it in the skin, and I don't know if anybody, whoever asked the question or whoever is cooking with us tonight, if you've ever roasted a whole head of garlic. Very easy thing to do. Take a whole head of garlic, cut the top off, actually like this. Put it on a piece of foil, drizzle olive oil over it, and then pop it in the oven once you seal it up. So you form like this nice little package. And then you just roast that till the garlic gets nice and soft and you can squeeze it out of the skins. With this, I don't want it to brown too quickly because it'll burn. And so it's going to cook in the skin. And I don't know if you can see my pan starting to brown a little bit. I don't want it to scorch. I just want it to get nice and brown. I'm going to put my chicken on top of my veggies. And then I'm going to pop this into our preheated oven, 400-degree oven, either in the middle or even the top shelf is fine. Okay. Are you guys with me? Ready to go ahead and put your chicken in the oven if you feel like your veggies are starting to brown a little bit. All right.
If anyone is on the same timing as Chef Brian, I'm starting a 30-minute timer.
Thank you, Britt.
How's everyone doing? Is everybody about the same timing, or are we still waiting on? And feel free to turn your mute off and jump verbally into class if you're comfortable doing so.
Hey, we're having fun, but our veggies are not yet browning, so we're just waiting on that, and then we'll be ready.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of surprising. Like, it's a butane burner. This is just a little tabletop burner, but the amount of BTUs it kicks out, and it actually caramelizes really, really fast. So it didn't take me very long. If your stove, it doesn't get as hot, you want to get the vegetables starting to brown. So yeah, don't rush that. So if they're not brown, toss them a couple times. Once you got a little bit of caramelization, set your chicken on top of it, and then throw the whole pan in the oven. All right. And I got Yukon Gold potatoes, and we're gonna think of this is like the opposite of mashed potatoes. I love mashed potatoes, especially around the holidays. You get together with your friends and family, and it's a roast chicken or a roast turkey or a ham. People go for stuffing or mashed potatoes. You can sort of divide, I think, the country between mashed potatoes and stuffing. So these are very rustic, and we're not going to make potatoes that are really silky smooth and rich and loaded with butter. All we're going to do is cook these potatoes and then crush them with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, really nice fruity olive oil, and then a little bit of butter and salt, pepper, and chopped parsley. Very, very simple, but you want nice potatoes. So Yukon Gold potatoes are my preference for this. I just think they're a little bit more flavorful. You could use a russet potato, but I think the creaminess of Yukon Golds are preferable. So go ahead and peel your potatoes if you already haven't done so. And we're gonna cook, I mean, it depends on the size of your potato. So if you have small ones, you may only need to cut them in half. If you have even bigger potatoes than I do, you might cut them down into sixths or eighths. I'm gonna cut these into quarters. They should cook fairly quickly, about 15 minutes or so, but not so quickly, or not so small rather, that the potatoes absorb a lot of water. When I make mashed potatoes, I actually cook the potatoes in their skins, in their jackets, so that they won't absorb water. In this instance, I'm okay with peeling them this way.
Chef,
Yes.
about the potatoes. If you like the potato skins, can you keep the skins on?
You could. Just as I said, this is a sort of a rustic style recipe. If you leave the skins on, it's even more rustic. And so there's certainly nothing wrong with that. I usually peel them, but if you want to leave them on, by all means, go ahead. I think that's roughly a pound and a half. So I'm going to, as I said, cut them into quarters.
One more question, Chef. The chicken and the potatoes going into the oven, are they covered at all, or no, lid?
No.
Okay.
No, you want this uncovered. Think of a roasted chicken. You want it to get nice, you want it to get caramelized. We're not trying to braise in this recipe. It's a roasting technique. All right, so potatoes cut in quarters, roughly all the same size, so they'll cook uniformly. And then we're gonna cover these with some water. And you want just enough water so that they'll be completely submerged. And then also you want to make sure you season your water. If you forget, you'll know later. It's like making pasta or rice and you forget to season them. Doesn't matter how much you add later on, it doesn't taste quite right. So you want to make sure that don't forget to put your salt in. And you know, you should be able to taste, it should be salty water. It's not like super salty, but sort of like cooking pasta. Okay, and if you're trying to speed it up, you can throw a lid on it, if I had one. Throw that on there just to get it to come up to a boil quicker. And then we'll get together some of our ingredients that we're going to need for our pan sauce. We'll also need butter, extra virgin olive oil. So Cakebread Cellars, we're a winery, and that's the business we're in, but we're also really passionate that wine and food are meant to be enjoyed together. And so we also make a little bit of olive oil most years. It's just something that's sold here at the winery. And it's really wonderful stuff that we get to cook with. Great for dressing a salad. In this instance where I'm not really going to cook it, I like using it in the mashed potatoes. But this is a sort of a nicer olive oil that I wouldn't necessarily cook with. You know, I like what I sauteed the chicken and the vegetables in. That's more of a all-purpose everyday olive oil. This is maybe a little bit nicer olive oil that's more assertive and fruity and maybe has some of that, you know, even a little bit of bitterness in the back of your throat when you use it, but that it stands up to food. We also have some honey. So we have bees on the property that we put to work, and they are close to some wildflower fields. They're not, bees don't pollinate grapevines, but there are open spaces that we have hives so that we can gather the honey from that. I have lemons. So our recipe, and those of you who are in California, you may have the same exact lemon that I do. If you're in the Midwest or you're on the East Coast, you may or may not have a Meyer lemon. If you go to the grocery store, there's only one lemon. That is a Eureka lemon. It has a thicker pith, rind, and it ships well, stores well, and is sort of the all-purpose lemon that we all associate with lemons and lemon juice. On the West Coast, a lot of people in their backyards, when I first moved to California 30, 40 years ago, would have a Meyer lemon tree in their backyard. And it is a cross between a lemon and an orange. And so it is very floral. It has a thinner skin, so it doesn't ship well. So that's why it doesn't tend to be seen in the stores. Or if it is in the stores, it's not for as long a period of time. So if you do come across it in a grocery store, it would be like now to February. You know, after that, they don't hold as well. So we'll juice them and we'll freeze the juice and use it for other things. But we're going to use that. We're going to use some of the zest as well as the juice, and then some flat leaf parsley. So I'm going to zest our citrus first and get that out of the way. If you don't, does everybody have a zester or a microplane? Seems like most kitchens, if you start getting into cooking, this is one of the tools that you acquire or you have. It's great for grating Parmesan. So just grate Parmesan over top of a salad. Garlic, I really love using this for garlic because rather than chopping garlic, it turns it into a paste. So if it's going into a dressing, it just distributes itself really well through a vinaigrette, a marinade sauce, something like that. Also good for getting the zest part off of any citrus. So we're going to get the citrus off of this, and I'm just going to rotate it because I just want the orange part, or the yellow part rather. I do not want the white part. So just shave that off. And just go all the way around. Good. And then we probably won't use all of the juice, but we're going to juice it. I think my potatoes are boiling. I'm just trying to speed that up. It's not really necessary for you to cover the potatoes like that, but the cellar where I'm at is a little bit chilly, so that brought it up to a simmer a lot quicker. We've got our juice for our zest. Cut this in half. Sometimes I see people when we do cooking classes, and I ask them to cut a lemon or even a tomato for that matter in half to get the juice out. So if there's a stem end to your citrus, you want to cut up. You want to cut in the middle of it, not down the side here. So if I do that, I'm only going to expose part of the cavity, the segments. But if I cut it in the middle, I say that's the equator. This exposes all the different seed segments, and you'd be much more efficient getting the juice out. The other thing, which I didn't do, is if you roll it, that also tends to loosen the juice a little bit. And then we're just going to squeeze the juice out of there.
Chef, do you have a preferred juicer for your citrus?
This is just a little stainless steel tabletop one. I don't know who makes it. If we're doing more, we have a KitchenAid electric one. I have one of those at home as well. Those are really good. If you also like drinking fresh squeezed orange juice in the morning, that's also nice to have. So the KitchenAid one works really well. But if you're only doing one or two at a time, you can use something like this. There's also those wooden ones, which I have in the drawer in the kitchen, and I'll use that. Or you can cut. I have more lemons here, so I guess I could have shown you the difference between. So squeezing the juice out of this is much more difficult than when it's cut that way. So that's what I meant to show you earlier. And then the other thing you can do is with a spoon, stick that in and then just rotate it. So if you don't have any of these tools, you can get the juice out that way. You just might need to pick out the seeds then. Okay. So, and as you start cooking, the more you cook, the more different tools you buy. You maybe buy a nice saute pan or a roasting pan, and then all the little tools that go along with it, you sort of acquire them. So as you first start getting into cooking, you may not have some of the things that make your life easier, but there is other ways to tackle it. So like if I didn't have a juicer, just using your spoon, you can get the juice out that way. All right. So we've got our juice, we've got our zest. I've got honey here. Any honey, this is, I mentioned it's wildflower honey, and wildflower, it can be any number of, wildflower actually, if you're selling honey, you call it wildflower. If you're looking at a field, they're probably what most people would consider weeds. So it's what's growing that flowers, and throughout the summer in California, it could be different things. And it's what is local to you. And it tends to be a little bit more assertive, I think, than maybe like orange blossom honey, which is pretty common in the grocery store. I have some chicken broth, which we're going to use for our sauce. I have butter, I have olive oil, and parsley. So that's the other thing. I have flat leaf parsley, which is, and there's very few times that I use curly leaf parsley, but you want flat leaf parsley, and we just want the leaves, okay? So not really wanting the stems in this instance.
Chef, when do you like to use curly parsley, if at all?
You know, when I was a teenager, I worked in a restaurant. I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I worked in a restaurant first as a dishwasher, but then you a lot of times you wind up in the garde manger or the cold section of the kitchen, and you make the salads and the sandwiches. And I remember everybody got a salad in this particular restaurant. It's more of a family style restaurant, and so I had to chop up iceberg and romaine and grated carrot and a little bit of grated cabbage for color. And I put it in these little bowls with a slice of tomato and a sprig of curly parsley. And I think that may have been one of the last times I've used it. It's flat leaf parsley just is fresher and has a better flavor to it. The texture to it. Also, if you're going to eat it, I think like curly leaf parsley a lot of times was more just a garnish. I don't think it was necessarily meant to be eaten as often. So I've got more than enough parsley there. And then another thing to keep in mind, you know, when you're chopping herbs is they're fresh, you know, we're not using dried herbs, and they're going to lend their flavor to whatever it is. The older they are, you know, parsley that's sitting in the bottom of your refrigerator and it's really wilted and brown and starting to, you know, decompose isn't going to add a lot of nice flavors to your recipe. The same thing is if your knife, you have a really dull knife and you just mash that up, a lot of its freshness is going to be lost before it even winds up in the recipe. So I don't know if you can see, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to gather up all the herbs nice and tight. And then I've got a sharp knife and I'm trying not to, you know, bruise them too much. Or chop them too much. So I want to chop them, you know, but not pulverize them. And, you know, this is an instance where having sharp knives is beneficial to the end product. You know, it's one of those little things, but it does, you know, the final product will just be a little bit brighter and have, you know, some nicer notes to it if the parsley is nice and fresh and it wasn't chopped too finely with a dull knife. And a great example would be basil. During the summer months, we all love tomato salads with, you know, fresh mozzarella. And as soon as you chop that basil with a dull knife, it turns black, you know, and it doesn't look as nice, and actually it loses some of its flavor. Parsley and cilantro are both two fresh herbs that lend a nice bright note to recipes, and I think you sort of need to treat them similarly. All right. I didn't bring a paring knife with me, but what you want to do with your potatoes to tell when they're done is I would normally use a paring knife, but in this instance I have end of my knife goes in easily. So I don't know if your potatoes have come up to a boil, and if you can put the end of your paring knife into the potato without much resistance, that's about where we want to cook it to. Am I ahead of you guys? Anybody's potatoes ready besides me? Not yet. I got Sarah's with me. I like the glove. So
We're getting a lot of not yets.
not yet. Okay. Yeah, it's amazing. I always think these little burners don't, you know, match what I have in the kitchen, but they actually cook really fast. I don't know if anybody knows what this is. So I grabbed some things from our garden here, and we have a walkway outside of our visitor center, and it's all different types of citrus. And if nobody's ever seen this before, this is called Buddha's hand, and it's a member of citrus family. But what's interesting about it is there's no juice inside. So it's very aromatic. Actually, mixologists, bartenders like making drinks with this because it's very fragrant and floral. And again, it would be something you would only see this time of year. A lot of times what people do with it is they candy it. And so using it in desserts. In Europe, there's one that's more, it doesn't have the fingers on it like these do. It's more solid, and they'll candy it. It's called citron, and like panforte and like fruitcake and stuff like that. If it says citron, it's in the same family as this. So I just thought I'd bring that out to show you guys. We just harvested just about all of them. I think Dennis Cakebread wants to make a little limoncello at his house, so we had to share them with him this year. But I'm gonna candy that one and use it in desserts. Okay, I'm gonna drain off my potatoes. Everybody's looking at me. They're not looking at their potatoes. I don't know if that's a good sign or not. Potatoes aren't ready. Alan's iPad, potatoes not ready?
Not ready
yet. No. All right. All right. Crank them up. You want them vigorously boiling. And I guess maybe since you're waiting a little bit on me, I'll tell you a little bit more about Cakebread Cellars if you don't know much about us already. Cakebread Cellars, we're located in Napa Valley, and I know Napa Valley has this world recognized wine growing region that you can run into people from all different parts of the world, and either they've been to the Napa Valley or they're familiar with the name. It is actually a fairly small area, and we are located almost smack dab in the middle of it. We're in our zip code mailing address is the Rutherford area, which is the Rutherford Bench. Jack and Dolores Cakebread bought the winery, they bought the property a little over 50 years ago. Jack Cakebread's mother went to school with the people that originally owned this property, and the Sturdivants owned this property, farming community, and he owned a garage in Oakland, but he also was a photographer and did the photography for a very early wine book in the early 70s by Nathan Croman. And he stopped in, had lunch with them, and then asked them if they ever wanted to sell their property, he'd be interested. And they took him up on it. And then he had to bring it up with his wife because he hadn't had that conversation with his wife yet. But that's sort of how they got into the wine business, not having been in the wine business prior to that. He went to viticulture school. You would be a winemaker. And so Jack was our first winemaker. And if you've never been to the Napa Valley, we're world renowned for our wineries, but also for our restaurants. And if you come to the Napa Valley, there's so many nice places to eat, wineries to go to and stay. But when they bought the property, it was a much sleepier place with not nearly a number of restaurants or hotels. And so Dolores, Jack went to school to be a winemaker. Dolores went to school to be a chef. And so she took classes in Marin. And when they entertained, he's pouring his wines and introducing people to the wines that he was making. Dolores would do all the cooking. And so they're very gracious people. And that's really the foundation of our history, was this hospitality that they really enjoyed sharing the winery with our guests and welcoming them to the winery and showing them how to enjoy our wines. And so Dolores is very passionate about cooking and gardening And Jack's our first winemaker, and they raised 3 boys, and their youngest son then became our second winemaker, Bruce Cakebread. And his brother, his middle son, joined the winery shortly thereafter. And Bruce and Dennis now own the winery solely. So it's still a family business, and that is sort of the foundation of how we've approached our business, and how we like to showcase our wines is around food. So being a winery chef here is a very pleasurable and something that I feel very honored to have done for the last 30 plus years. It's a wonderful place to live and to visit. So if you ever have the opportunity to come to Napa, we would love to see you. Cooking classes are just one of the ways that we entertain our guests. We have a whole variety of different experiences that people can do when they come to visit us. Some are seated, some are walking around the winery to get to sort of see the winemaking facility. It's all what you're sort of interested in. But that's just a little bit about us. And hopefully your potatoes are about done at this point. So how about some thumbs up now? Potatoes, yes? Sarah's been with me all along. So before my potatoes cool down, and I drained them off, and I wanted the steam to come off, some of that condensation, but I don't want them to get cold. So I am going to add a little bit of butter to them. But I mean, this is all to your taste and how you think they taste best. But I do want it to be more about the olive oil. So add some butter, but an equal, if not more, amount of olive oil that the potatoes are going to absorb then when we go to crush them. Okay. And then a little bit more salt. I know I salted potatoes already, so they're not really going to need much, but I am going to add a little bit more salt and some freshly ground black pepper. And with a potato masher, I'm just going to crush these. And again, I'm not trying to make mashed potatoes. I want them to have texture. All I'm doing is I'm crushing the potatoes to absorb the olive oil and the butter and distribute the salt and pepper. So I don't want them to be separated. I want that olive oil to sort of get absorbed by, looks good. A little bit of chopped parsley. Just going to stir that in. And then if you want to be a good chef, a good cook, you have to taste things as you go. So I recently went to an event, and very talented chef, but I could tell that they didn't taste it because it was lacking salt when it came out to the table. So taste it. I think I'm good with salt. Olive oil is good. Yeah, no, I'm happy. So. Okay, so it still should have some texture to it. It's not perfectly smooth, but the potatoes were cooked enough that I didn't really need to put a lot of pressure on them to have them dissolve and break up. Okay. And we're close to 30 minutes, right, Britt?
Yes, you have 1 minute and 40 seconds.
1 minute, 40 seconds, everybody. Get ready. Time for another sip of wine, I guess. Do I have any other questions?
We had one question earlier that I didn't get to. Herb scissors, what are your feeling toward them?
Herb scissors.
Yes.
I didn't go there, but I did go off on a little bit of a tangent on parsley and herbs and not bruising them. And so some chefs won't use a knife. They'll use a pair of scissors. And it's a little bit more gentle. And I think, if you want to, especially with basil, if that's gonna make the difference between them being bruised with a dull knife, scissors might work better. So yeah, that's It's good. Chives also, if you have fresh chives, and at least in Northern California, I know if you're in the Midwest right now, or if you're on the East Coast, and I know I was watching a football game yesterday and the weather was miserable. You know, nothing's growing outside. But here we still have, I mean, I have parsley growing at home, thyme, rosemary, oregano, chives, all those things, sage, will all grow, you know, in a temperate climate. And so I encourage you to do it rather than having to buy it and then half of the herbs are thrown away because you only use half of them. Even my mother-in-law who lived in Florida, when I would go visit her and it gets too hot for a lot of these herbs during the summer months, she grew them on her porch, and so they were sort of protected. And you're more likely to use them, I think, if you grow them. California, some of them you don't even have to pay any attention to. It's like rosemary. Rosemary is like a weed here. You have to prune it back because it'll get too unwieldy. Okay, so do you guys want to check on if we all put our chicken in at the same time, you want to pull it out? And this is what I seared off a little bit earlier. So I'll be upfront with you. I don't have an oven behind me. So I seared this off and I roasted chicken on top. The veggies should cook down a little bit. They should have some color on them. My garlic still in the skins. You can take that out and set that on your cutting board. I threw in 6, so I've got 4. 6. All right, there we go. Okay, and then I'm going to transfer chicken. Still nice and hot, right? Oh, you know what? I apologize. I grabbed the wrong pan. So this is the one I just did. This is the one. I knew there's no way that chicken could be raw. Okay, so I'm gonna take my chicken out of the pan. I'm gonna swap out the garlic because that garlic is not cooked. So. And just gonna put the garlic onto a cutting board. Honestly, you could serve this just as is right now, and I think you'd be pretty happy. Your guests would be pretty happy. But I want to make a pan sauce for it, and I think that's a nice skill to have because it's applicable in a lot of different ways. Whether it's, in this instance, a piece of chicken or a pork chop or a steak, and you can make a pan sauce really easily. I once interviewed with a chef. He was really adamant about this. If you work in a restaurant, a lot of times if you're to be able to watch the chefs cook, they'll do exactly what we just did. They'll sear off whatever the protein is, and they'll put it in the oven and continue cooking it, and then take it out when it's cooked. And then that pan may just go to the dishwasher. And he sort of get upset about that because the bottom of the pan, I don't know if you can see, let's see, what are you guys seeing me straight on or overhead or both, Britt?
At the moment, both.
They're seeing both. So you can see there's some browning on the bottom. And if you have more than that, that's even better, but that has flavor to it. So if you just throw that in the sink and put soapy water in it, all that flavor goes down the drain. And an opportunity has been lost. We are going to turn this into a little pan sauce, which is going to make our veggies taste better and our chicken taste better. Okay. And as I said, this same technique you can push in all kinds of different ways, depending upon you know, the protein you're using or the seasonings you want to do, but we're making a pan sauce, and I'm going to put that back on the stove, and I'll turn that on high and let that heat up. And we're going to, what a recipe would say, we're going to deglaze that pan. And so what that means is we're adding a liquid to it. And in this instance, I want it to be wine. Now I'm going to cook with Cakebread wine. You don't have to cook with Cakebread wine. I realize that this is probably more expensive and is more pleasurable to drink than to cook with, but cook with something you wouldn't mind pouring yourself a glass of, right? And so we're going to use a little bit of this Chardonnay. Once it goes back on the skillet or on the heat, you want to see it start sizzling, right? And so that those brown bits we're going to release with the wine. You could just do this with stock. You could even do it with water, but the wine, the role that plays is the acidity in the wine helps to brighten everything up. We're going to cook the alcohol off. So the alcohol is going to get cooked off, and all the water that's in it. And so it's the acidity that's what we're shooting for here. Okay. And you could do it with red wine, but in this instance, then the color of the sauce is not desirable. If we're doing beef, you could easily do that. Okay. So this goes in, and just enough that this is actually a wooden spatula, flat-sided like this, is one of my favorite tools in the kitchen, because then I want to release that brown glaze and scrape the bottom. Like I said, I do the same thing when my wife roasts a chicken at home. I'll just make a pan sauce with the brown bits in the bottom of the roasting pan. Or, I mean, we're just coming off of Thanksgiving. You can think of a turkey, the same thing. You roast a turkey, the bottom of that pan's got all those brown bits in it. That's the basis of a really flavorful gravy. Okay. Now that's in there. The garlic, and mine might not, yours might be hotter and might be harder for you to do, but you should be able to squeeze. And I've got bigger cloves. I don't, mine aren't as caramelized as sometimes they are, but you should be able to squeeze them right out of their papery husks. And they smell wonderful. I just spread that on a baguette and be pretty happy right there. But then if you want, with the side of your knife, mash it up. And it shouldn't take very long to mash up. And that'll also sort of break down into our sauce. Okay, so wine's cooking down. I want it to almost disappear, what they would in cooking school say au sec. So you're cooking it dry. And we're just concentrating the acidity that's in the wine. And a wine that has nice acid to it is really what you want. So a really oaky, buttery Chardonnay isn't my first choice. A wine that's got bright acidity is really my go-to on this. Okay. So almost gone. Glaze on the bottom's been released. A little bit of chicken broth goes in there. I'm going to throw my mashed roasted garlic. I'm going to break it up a little bit so it dissolves. Once it starts boiling, it's going to break up all by itself. Let that come back up to a boil. Is everybody with me?
I think some people might be a little bit behind you.
Okay. Also going to put my lemon zest in there. Got a That'll add more brightness to it. Lemon juice too. I'm going to add the lemon juice and the Sean. I'm going to add the lemon juice and the parsley at the very end because I want them to be the brightest, and so that's just going to wake things up. I didn't even add the honey yet, so I'm sort of waiting on lemon juice, parsley, a little bit of honey, and even the butter. And so the butter, I'm not going to add a lot of it, but it helps emulsify the sauce a little bit. So finishing a sauce with just a little bit of butter, this gives it a little bit more mouthfeel and extends the flavors on the sauce to marry with your components. So we're going to reduce that down.
Chef, is it still on high heat?
It is. So I've got it cranked all the way up. Why the zest earlier? Does it maintain its brightness more? I think the zest can go in a little bit sooner and dissipate its flavor throughout. But I don't know, if you had another chef here, he might tell you that at the very end. Actually, what we're doing, I don't know if anybody's ever had ossobuco before. So ossobuco is classic Italian dish from northern Italy that is traditionally braised veal shank, and it's incredibly rich. So the meat sort of unctuous. And what the Italians do to brighten it up and cut through that richness is they have parsley, garlic, and lemon zest chopped together. It's all chopped together. And then you just sprinkle that over the top of it right before you serve it. So it's not even really cooking other than the heat of the food. And it releases its aroma and it sort of cuts through the richness of the veal shank. Because it's like lamb shanks too. They're very unctuous and they've got sort of this almost mouth, like your lips sort of smack together when you're eating them. So, okay. And I can tell when the sauce is starting to thicken because the bubbles they'll get a little bit bigger, and it means that it's getting more viscous. So that's sort of what I'm looking for as it's reducing down. So just a little bit of honey, and the honey, I don't want this necessarily to be sweet, but I do want, I don't know, there's a sweet note to it, but then I counteract that with the acidity from the lemon. That's a little bit further. Throw some parsley in there. If I add the parsley in the very beginning, it loses its color and its brightness. So, and then, oh, wait a minute. And then like a tablespoon of butter. And once you add the butter, you want that to emulsify. So I don't want it just to sit there like it is right now. I want to swirl the pan. So as that butter is melting, it's being emulsified into the sauce. So you can sort of see the couple pats of butter in there, but as they melt, it's emulsifying. So it's not sort of just sitting, melted butter sitting on top of the sauce. They all become one. And then what I usually like to do is return my chicken to the pan just briefly, just so it gets coated in that sauce. If I was doing a whole roast chicken, like I keep talking about my wife's roast chicken, if I was doing that, a lot of times I'll cut the chicken on a plate, so that any juices that come off of it, then I would add those into the pan sauce as well, because that's also a really nice flavor. Okay. So, and I'm gonna plate mine up, and I might be ahead of you, but at least gives you guys a little bit of an idea of where you're at. So your olive oil crushed potatoes, put a nice spoonful on a warm plate or on a platter. If you want to do all of this on a platter, by all means, go ahead and do that. But I've got my my crushed potatoes, some veggies on top of it and sort of spilling off of it. And, you know, we've got 4 of these. I tend to think that 2 is a portion, but you could just sort of leave it as 1. If you want to look a little bit sexier. And then spoon your sauce over the top. So this seems very homey to me. This is a nice, I think, dish that you can put together in a little over an hour. So can everybody see? Come closer.
Looks delicious, Chef.
Smells good. I assume that everybody's house is starting to smell good.
Oh, Chef, did you add the lemon juice?
That's why you
on
need to
it.
taste. That's why you need to taste as you're cooking. Yes, Britt called me out, so I forgot one of the
And full
ingredients
credit,
there.
it's one of our home cooks that called it out. They're on top of
good.
it.
It's good that they're paying attention. Yes, that little squeeze of lemon at the end is just to brighten everything up. You know, you've got the wine that's in the beginning, that adds a little backbone of acidity, but that little lemon juice at the end just sort of brightens things up. Sometimes chefs will even use just a little tiny little splash of vinegar to brighten up their sauces. But so that's the role that plays. And thank you for mentioning it, because yes, you do want to make sure that's in there, especially the fact that I have a little sweet component to it with that honey, even though there's not a lot of it. You want to balance that out. Okay. So anybody want to, if there's anybody like right behind me and your plate is done, Jean's gonna share. I get it looks vertical. You get a nice height on it. Looks like you might work in a restaurant. Looks good. Nice portion size. How about you, Sarah? You seem to be cooking along with me at a good clip, though. Is your plate done? No, putting the finishing touches on it. Okay.
Chef, you had mentioned plating on a warm plate. I don't know if many home cooks know that how to warm a plate for service, or that they
Right.
can.
So yes, you can. And so in a restaurant, if the plate comes out to your table and it's cold, and that's this, especially if you work in the industry, this is one of the things we check is the plate comes out and it's cold. You know, already we're being critical. Now, you're not in a restaurant, you're in your home. But if you put warm food onto a cold plate, and I'm in a cold cellar, so it cools your food down quickly. So just turning your oven on warm, 200 degrees or whatever, and putting it in there, or you turn the oven off after you roasted your chicken, and you put your plates in there just for a moment. I mean, if you have to, you use a hand towel to handle them. But the food's going to stay warm on the plate longer at the table, especially if you're enjoying your company and your conversation and a glass of wine, that the food's not going to cool down too quickly. So warm food should be served on a warm plate. Cold food should be served on a cold plate. Okay. The other thing, since you guys are catching up with me, Sarah, Sarah, yours look very nice. I see nice color there, so very good. Good job. Thank you for cooking with me. Anybody else? Alan, that looks really nice. You got a nice pool of sauce. Hopefully everybody's kitchen smells good. So the other thing, I wanted to do this recipe because I thought it lent itself to one, talking about roasting something and getting color out of it, but also a pan sauce. As I said, we deglaze the pan. It could be wine. In this instance, it's white wine, but you use red wine. You could use fortified wine. You could use port. You could use sherry, vermouth. You could skip the wine and just do it with stock. And that would be good as well. We used roasted garlic. Maybe you want to saute some garlic and some shallots. That also would be a pretty classic thing to do. And then your stock goes in there. You might add a little bit of cream. So say steak au poivre. You sear your steaks off, and then you add some minced shallots to the pan, some cracked black pepper, and then cream, maybe a little bit of veal demi-glace, and maybe some mustard at the end. So you can take this in many different ways. You could add different herbs to it. You could put whole grain mustard into it, capers, cornichons. Once you sort of know the technique, it lends itself to you maybe playing with whatever you have in your refrigerator or what you're in the mood to use. Okay. Any other questions?
And did you mention earlier that you could use different chicken parts, like a full leg?
I didn't so much, and
Okay.
and this is personal preference. So if roast chicken in my house, the dark meat gets eaten first. If in your house you go for the breast meat first, then maybe you want to do this with chicken breast. But I personally like legs and the thighs more, and the wings. If you use the breast, they tend to cook a little bit quicker, and you can dry them out easier. So another reason I like to cook on the bone, because it's a little bit more forgiving. But if you are more of a person, I don't really like dark meat as much as I like white meat, you could do this with the breasts. I would, again, encourage you to leave the skin on, whether you eat it or not. I just think it helps contribute to the browning effect on the bottom of the pan, as well as helps keep the meat nice and moist while you're cooking it. So, or if you do like a whole chicken, and then you would sear off maybe your dark meat first, and then add your white meat to the pan, because it's gonna not take as long. So yeah, it's personal preference. I think dark thighs are more forgiving, that they won't dry out as quickly, and they're gonna take a little bit longer to cook, which means I'll have more opportunity for caramelization to happen on the bottom of the pan for that pan sauce that I wanted to show you. Thank you, Britt. Very good question. In Pinehurst, they're sitting down to dinner. So
Well, it's practically midnight in Pinehurst.
yeah, my hat's off to you guys for waiting this late. I don't know if your mic is on or not, Pinehurst. I think you're trying to talk to us, but
Yeah, we don't hear
Oh,
you.
look, we can talk. How
Oh,
about
yeah.
that? Oh, these are delicious.
good.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you.
A midnight snack.
Let's go eat.
All right.
Anybody else? You can turn your mics off if you want to share anything or any other sort of final questions.
We're recording this class, so it'll be added to YouTube, and you'll receive the link tomorrow. And we'll also include the recipe again, in case if you want to cook this again.
Ours is delicious. Thank you so much. We had such a fun time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. Hope everybody has a happy New Year's. Enjoy your families and be safe.
Bon appetit.
Cheers. Thank you, Brett.
Happy New
Cheers.
Year. Thank you so
Everybody.
much.
Happy New
Thank
Year.
you.
Thank
Happy
you.
New
Lots of
Year.
love to you. Thank you for sharing your time and your
Thank you.
expertise.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.